They told me to stay in my lane, that it was a man's job, that I was just a delivery girl with no degree, no connections, and no chance. 30 engineers gave up, but I didn't. I solved it, and what I found at the end changed my life forever. Hi, I'm Jade, and if anyone ever made you feel too small, too broke, or too different to matter, this story is for you. Before we begin, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon. Because stories like this, you don't want to miss them. Most days, I was just the girl with the clipboard and takeout bags. People barely looked me in the eye. Deliveries here, they'd say, without even glancing up from their screens. I'd smile, say thank you just loud enough to be polite, and move on. It didn't bother me, not as much as it used to. I'd learned early that being overlooked was part of the deal, especially when you're a black woman in tech country without a degree, without a fancy title, without someone powerful vouching for you. But what they didn't know? I wasn't just delivering food. I was watching, listening, learning. I've loved machines since I was 12. While other kids were outside playing tag, I was in the garage with my uncle's old busted radio, trying to make it sing again. I never stopped. I taught myself how engines breathe, how circuits flow, how systems talk to each other. Nights and weekends were for tinkering. YouTube was my classroom, and scrap yards were my playground. I wanted to be an engineer more than anything, but life had other plans. No scholarships, no backup, no margin for mistakes. So I worked. I hustled. I made deliveries to keep the lights on and kept my dreams tucked quiet in the back seat. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of what could have been. Walking through those sleek Silicon Valley buildings, hearing engineers speak in code, catching sight of blueprints taped to walls. I'd pretend for just a second that I belonged there, that I was part of it. But then the elevator doors would close and it'd be back to reality. They didn't see me, not yet. But that was okay, because I saw them. I saw everything. And one day I knew they'd have no choice but to see me too. It was just another Tuesday, or at least it started that way. I was doing my usual lunch run, Thai food for the execs upstairs, burritos for the software team, 2 oat milk lattes for the AI lab. I'd memorized everyone's orders by then. As I walked through the sleek glass lobby of that tech giant, Titan Dynamics, I could feel the tension in the air. Something was off. People weren't chatting or typing or even looking at their screens. They were pacing, whispering, shouting into phones. I didn't know what was going on, but I could feel it. Something was broken. On my third trip up, I passed by the lab. The door was cracked open, and I heard one of the engineers mutter, 30 of us and still no fix? Another voice replied, this thing's dead in the water. If we don't get it running, the whole launch tanks. That caught my attention. I slowed down, not too obvious, pretending to double-check the order slip in my hand. Apparently, their new prototype, a high-efficiency energy converter, was failing. It wasn't just a glitch. It was a full-on collapse. 30 engineers had been flown in to work on it for weeks, and none of them could figure it out. The CEO had already postponed the investor demo twice. If they didn't get it working soon, the funding round would fall through. Millions, maybe billions on the line. I kept walking, didn't say a word. But inside, my heart was racing. I'd seen that design before, on a whiteboard I passed last week. It looked familiar, too familiar. Something about it had stuck with me. I didn't have a badge or a title, but I had ideas, and in that moment I knew. This wasn't just a problem. It might be my moment. The moment came quietly. No spotlight, no dramatic music. Just me, standing in the hallway outside the lab, holding a half-empty drink tray, staring at those schematics like they were calling my name. My mind had been spinning all night, replaying every detail I'd overheard, every diagram I'd accidentally glimpsed. I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always do. I started sketching. On napkins, scraps of receipts, anything I could find. And the more I looked at it, the more it made sense. The failure wasn't in the code or the hardware. It was in the way the systems were talking to each other. The connection points were misaligned just slightly, but enough to throw everything off. The next day, I walked in like usual, but my hands were sweating. I knew I had two options: stay silent and play it safe, or take a chance that could blow up in my face. I chose the second. I waited until the room had quieted down, then cleared my throat. Hey, I know I'm just the delivery girl, but can I try something? You could have heard a pin drop. One of the engineers scoffed, actually laughed out loud. Another said, "You fixin' to plug in a smoothie, sweetheart?" I forced a smile. I was used to that tone. But what surprised me was the one man in the room who didn't laugh: Luke, the billionaire CEO himself. He just raised an eyebrow and said, "Let her try." I walked in, heart pounding. I didn't need permission. I just needed one shot. And somehow I had it. That moment didn't feel big from the outside, but inside, it was everything. I wasn't just stepping into the lab, I was stepping into the life I'd always dreamed of. I knew I had one chance, one shot to prove I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't just some girl with a clipboard and a dream. The lab was quiet, too quiet. Everyone was watching, probably expecting me to trip over a wire or short circuit the whole thing. My hands were shaking as I stepped toward the prototype, this sleek, humming beast of a machine that had stumped experts with degrees and decades of experience. But I didn't flinch. I'd been studying this in my head for days now, breaking it apart in my imagination, reconstructing it over and over until I could see the flaw clearly. It was subtle, something that didn't show up on paper. The problem wasn't the machine itself. It was the way its components were communicating. The timing was off, just enough to throw the system into chaos. I could feel it in the rhythm, like a song that was one beat too slow. I asked for a few basic tools, nothing fancy, just a screwdriver, a multimeter, and some wire. The engineers looked annoyed. Luke, though? He stood back with his arms crossed, curious, like he was watching a puzzle unfold. I crouched beside the unit and started making small adjustments. My heart raced with every turn of the screw, every flicker of voltage. I wasn't even sure if it would work, but I knew it should. I didn't speak. I didn't explain. I let the machine speak for me. And then it powered on, not just a flicker or a buzz, but fully, smooth, steady, alive. The room froze. One of the engineers blinked, leaned closer, and whispered, "No way." Another started checking the diagnostics, scrolling through data, then turned to the others and nodded slowly. It was working. Perfectly. I stood up, wiping my hands on my shirt, barely able to breathe. I felt like I'd just sprinted through fire, and in that silence, Luke walked over. He didn't say much, just looked at me and smiled. "Interesting," he said. "Very interesting." In that moment, I realized something deep. Brilliance doesn't always wear a lab coat. And sometimes, the person everyone ignores is the one with the answer the whole world's been waiting for. The next morning, everything felt different. I showed up in my usual black delivery polo, but this time, heads turned when I walked in. People moved aside. Eyes followed me. Whispers floated behind my back. I wasn't invisible anymore, and that was new. A little uncomfortable, to be honest. But I kept walking, pretending it didn't get to me. That lab where I had barely been allowed to set foot now looked like a whole new world. The engineers were gathered around the machine I had fixed. Screens lit up with clean data, test results coming in at peak performance. And in the middle of it all was Luke, calm and sharp-eyed, like always. When he saw me, he didn't hesitate. He nodded toward the machine. She's running smoother than ever. What did you do? I took a breath. I just listened to her. The way she was stalling, it wasn't a failure. It was a miscommunication between the control relay and the timing circuit. The energy feedback loop was collapsing under its own weight. I just cleared the way. There was a long pause. One of the engineers, one who had laughed at me the day before, finally spoke. She's right. We ran the numbers. That fix wasn't luck. It was genius. Genius. That word hung in the air. I had never heard it applied to me before. Not in school, not in any job, not even in my own mind. But standing there, greasy palms and all, I felt something shift, like I finally belonged in the room. Luke didn't waste time. He called for an internal meeting, executives, department heads, even the board liaison. The glass conference room filled fast, and before I could slip away, he motioned for me to come inside. "This is Jade," he said simply, once everyone had settled. "She's the reason the prototype works." The silence was thick. Then someone said, "But she's not even on the team." "She is now," Luke replied, "effective immediately." It didn't feel real. I sat there while they discussed the next steps, project timelines, investor briefings. But all I could think was how strange and beautiful it was to finally be seen, not as a helper or a fluke or some lucky guess, but as someone who had something real to offer. When the meeting ended, Luke walked me out and said, "I've been watching for people who see things differently. You've got that. I don't care where you came from. You belong here." And right then, I believed him. For the first time in my life, I didn't just hope I had a future. I knew I did. This wasn't just a turning point in the project. It was the turning point of my story. Working with Luke was nothing like I expected. I thought he'd be all suits and silence, the kind of billionaire who didn't know how to say thank you without a PR team. But he was different. Sharp, yes. Intense, definitely. But also curious, patient, and surprisingly down to earth. He never treated me like I was beneath him. From day one, it was clear. He respected how my mind worked, and that meant everything. We started spending long hours in the lab together. At first, it was all business, blueprints, prototypes, debugging systems. But slowly something shifted. He'd stay behind a little longer after the team left, asking me about my background, how I taught myself, what drove me to understand things so deeply. I'd pretend not to notice when he brought two coffees instead of one, or when he'd smile just a little too long after I said something funny. I tried to keep it professional. I mean, come on, me, a delivery girl, and him, a billionaire? That's not a fairy tale, that's a punchline. But the more time we spent together, the more real it felt. We talked about our childhoods, his, full of expectations and pressure, mine, full of obstacles and resilience. He told me he'd never met someone who saw machines the way I did. I told him I'd never met someone who believed in me without needing proof on paper. There was a night, late, maybe close to midnight. We were working on a new model for energy storage. The lab was quiet, the lights low, and we were side by side, sketching ideas. He looked at me and said softly, "You know, you don't have to prove anything anymore. You've already changed everything." And I just looked back at him, heart pounding, and said, "So have you." That night, I knew we were building more than machines. We were building us. When word got out, it spread fast. Not just the story about the prototype, but us. Headlines started popping up. Billionaire CEO dating former delivery girl. Silicon Valley's Cinderella story. From takeout to takeover. At first, it felt surreal, like we were starring in someone else's movie. But the fairy tale shine wore off quickly. The comments were brutal. Some people were cheering us on, sure, but a lot weren't. She's just using him. There's no way she's actually smart. He's just slumming it. I'd never been in the spotlight before, and now it felt like every move I made was being picked apart. Every outfit, every word, every breath. It got to me more than I wanted to admit. I started second guessing myself, pulling away. I stopped staying late at the lab. I declined dinner invites, avoided Luke's gaze in meetings. I didn't want to be the reason his company became gossip. I didn't want to be the problem he had to defend. One night, he showed up at my apartment. No drivers, no press, just him. He looked tired, but determined. He didn't ask to come in. He just said, "You're not holding me back, Jade. You're the reason I'm moving forward." I stood in that doorway, tears stinging my eyes. They'll never stop looking at me like I don't belong. He stepped closer. Then we'll make them see the truth. You changed my company. You changed me. And none of them have to understand it. I do. I realized then this wasn't just about love. It was about partnership, about standing tall, even when the world tried to cut you down. We didn't get here the easy way, but we got here together. And I wasn't going to run from that, not anymore. It wasn't a grand, over-the-top proposal with flash mobs or a rented castle. We sealed it with a kiss right there in the lab, under the glow of the machines we brought to life together. It wasn't just a proposal, it was a promise. We weren't just writing a love story. We were rewriting what success, love, and partnership could look like together. They said I was just a delivery girl. Now I co-own a tech company, and I'm married to the man who believed in me when nobody else did. So if the world underestimates you, let them, and then prove them wrong. Comment your favorite part, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real love and success stories.